They handed her a pen and told her she was worthless. In front of 50 laughing relatives, Elena was forced to sign away her marriage, her home, and her dignity. They thought they had won. They thought they were throwing trash out to the street. But they didn't know that the phone in her pocket was vibrating with a call that would change everything. The ink on the divorce papers hadn't even dried when a fleet of black SUVs pulled into the driveway. She wasn't just a discarded wife anymore. She was the most powerful woman in the room. This is the story of how a family's greed became their ultimate destruction. You won't believe what happens next. The late August sun beat down on the manicured lawns of the Thorne family estate in Connecticut. It was the kind of heat that made the air shimmer. But for Elena, there was no time to seek shade. "Elena, the ice buckets are melting. Do you expect us to drink warm champagne?" The shrill voice of Beatrice Thorne, the family matriarch, cut through the humid air like a whip. Elena, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, nodded quickly. "I'm on it, Beatrice. I was just helping Uncle Jerry find his seat." "Jerry is fine. My mimosa is not," Beatrice snapped, adjusting her oversized sun hat and turning her back on her daughter-in-law. Elena rushed toward the kitchen, her feet aching in the cheap flats she had worn for 3 years. This was the annual Thorne family reunion, a display of wealth, arrogance, and exclusion. And for the last 4 years, ever since she had married Julian Thorne, Elena had not been a guest. She had been the help. Inside the cool, air-conditioned kitchen, Elena leaned against the granite island for a split second, closing her eyes. She loved Julian. Or at least, she loved the man he used to be. The man who had charmed her at the bookstore where she worked, who told her he didn't care that she was an orphan with 0 connections and a mountain of student debt. But that man had slowly vanished, replaced by the vice president of Thorne Logistics, a man who now looked at her with the same disdain his mother did. "You're taking too long," a deep voice rumbled from the doorway. Elena jumped, spinning around to see Julian standing there. He looked impeccable in his navy linen suit, a glass of scotch in his hand. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the stain on her apron. "I'm sorry, Julian. The ice machine is slow," she stammered. "You're always making excuses, Elena," Julian said, taking a sip of his drink. "Mother is stressed. This reunion is important for the company image. We have investors here. Try not to embarrass me today, all right?" "I'm trying, Julian. I really am, but nothing," he interrupted, checking his Rolex. "Just get the ice, and fix your hair. You look frazzled. It's unappealing." He walked away without another word, leaving a cloud of expensive cologne in his wake. Elena felt the familiar sting of tears pricking her eyes, but she swallowed them down. Not today, she told herself. Just get through the barbecue, serve the cake, clean up, and then you can go home and sleep. She grabbed the heavy bags of ice, her arms straining, and hauled them back out into the heat. As she moved through the crowd of laughing relatives, she felt invisible. Cousins were comparing their new Teslas. Aunts were gossiping about vacations in the Maldives. Elena, the girl from the foster system, was a ghost in their machine. She reached the main beverage station, dumping the ice into the silver basins. "Careful," a voice sneered. Elena froze. It was Chloe, Beatrice's personal assistant, and a woman who had been lingering around Julian far too often lately. Chloe was wearing a dress that cost more than Eleanor's entire wardrobe, and she was looking at Eleanor with a predatory smirk. "You splashed water on my shoes," Chloe said, pointing to a tiny droplet on her red-bottomed heel. "I'm sorry, Chloe. I didn't mean to," Elena murmured, reaching for a napkin to wipe it. Chloe kicked Elena's hand away. "Don't touch me. Just go away. You ruin the aesthetic of the party." A few of Julian's cousins laughed nearby. Elena pulled her hand back, clutching the napkin to her chest. She looked around for Julian, hoping he would step in, hoping he would defend his wife. She saw him across the lawn. He was laughing, his hand resting casually on the lower back of a tall, blonde woman, a real estate heiress named Vanessa. He saw Elena looking at him. He didn't smile. He simply looked away and took another sip of his drink. The message was clear. You are on your own. By 4:15 p.m., the reunion was in full swing. The catering staff, the actual hired help, had arrived to serve the main dinner, which meant Eleanor was finally allowed to sit down. However, when she approached the main family table, she realized there was no chair for her next to Julian. There was a seat for Beatrice, a seat for Julian. And next to Julian sat Chloe, the assistant. "Oh," Elena said, standing awkwardly by the table as the family began to take their seats. "Julian, there's no chair." The chatter at the table died down. Beatrice slowly buttered a roll, not looking up. "The table is full, Elena. We only rented a certain number of chairs for the head table. You can sit with the children at the picnic bench near the gazebo." The children's table was 50 yards away, in the direct sun. "But I'm his wife," Elena whispered, her voice trembling. Julian finally looked at her. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth she remembered from their honeymoon. "Don't make a scene, Elena. It's just a seating chart. Go sit with the kids." "Actually," Beatrice interrupted, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. She stood up, tapping her spoon against her crystal wine glass. The sharp ting-ting-ting silenced the entire garden. 100 guests turned to look at the head table. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," Beatrice announced, her voice projecting with practiced authority. "Before we serve the prime rib, we have a bit of family business to attend to. A restructuring, if you will." Elena felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Beatrice never did anything without a reason. "As you know," Beatrice continued, "the Thorn legacy is built on strength, pedigree, and excellence. We prune the dead branches so the tree can grow." Beatrice's eyes locked onto Elena. "Elena, dear, come here," Beatrice said, gesturing with a manicured hand. Elena hesitated. "Me? Yes, you. Come stand by your husband." Elena walked slowly to the head table. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She stood next to Julian, who refused to make eye contact with her. He was staring at the tablecloth, his jaw clenched. "What is this?" Elena whispered to him. Julian didn't answer. Beatrice reached under the table and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She slammed it onto the table, rattling the silverware. "Elena," Beatrice said, her voice loud enough for the back rows to hear. "For 4 years, we have tried to mold you. We gave you clothes, we gave you a home, we gave you the Thorn name. We hoped you would rise to the occasion." "But you haven't," the crowd murmured. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. I work hard every day for this family, Beatrice. I do everything you ask." "You are a liability," Beatrice spat. "You are plain. You are uneducated. You come from nothing, and you bring nothing to this table but embarrassment. Julian needs a partner who can elevate him, not a charity case he picked up in a used bookstore." Beatrice slid the envelope toward Elena. "These are divorce papers," Beatrice announced. The gasps from the guests were audible. Elena felt like the ground was tilting beneath her feet. She looked at Julian. "Julian? What is she talking about?" Julian finally looked up. His eyes weren't sad. They were annoyed. "It's over, Elena. Just sign them." "Over?" Elena choked out. "But we're married. You promised to love me. I've sacrificed everything for you. I quit my classes because you said we couldn't afford them. I worked 2 jobs while you finished your MBA. I supported you." "And I appreciate the help," Julian said coldly. "But I've outgrown you. Look at you, Elena. Look at this party. You don't belong here. You never did." "We're prepared to be generous," Beatrice interjected, opening the folder to the signature page. "We are offering you a settlement of $10,000. That should be enough for you to find a small apartment and start whatever sad little life you're destined for." "$10,000? Elena cried, tears finally spilling over. "Julian, we have hundreds of thousands in the joint account. I helped save that money." "That is Thorn money," Julian snapped it. "And if you don't sign this right now, Beatrice's lawyers will make sure you don't get a single penny. You'll leave with nothing but the clothes on your back." "Why are you doing this here?" Elena sobbed, looking around at the sea of faces. Some were pitying, but most were amused, treating her heartbreak like a spectator sport. "Why humiliate me like this?" "Because you need to learn your place," Beatrice smiled cruelly. "And because we have another announcement to make." Beatrice placed a hand on Chloe's shoulder. Chloe beamed, holding up her left hand. A massive diamond ring, far larger than the tiny band Elena wore, sparkled in the sunlight. "Julian and Chloe have been seeing each other for 6 months, Beatrice declared. "And once you sign these papers, they will be officially engaged. Chloe comes from a good family. She understands business. She is the future of this family." Elena felt like she had been punched in the chest. 6 months. While she was cooking his dinner, washing his clothes, and rubbing his back after long days, he was with her. "Sign the papers, Elena," Julian commanded, shoving a gold fountain pen into her trembling hand. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Elena looked at the pen. She looked at the smirking face of Chloe, the triumphant glare of Beatrice, and the cold, dead eyes of the husband she had adored. She was trapped. They had the lawyers, the money, and the power. If she fought, they would crush her. With shaking fingers, she took the pen. The silence in the garden was deafening. The only sound was the scratching of the nib against the paper as Eleanor Vance signed her name, tears dropping onto the document, blurring the ink. "Good girl," Beatrice sneered, snatching the papers away the moment the pen lifted. "Now get out of my sight. Security will escort you to the gate." But just as Elena turned to leave, defeated and broken, a sound pierced the silence. Bzzzt. Bzzzt. It wasn't Elena's old, cracked phone. It was a sleek, black satellite phone that had been slipped into her purse weeks ago by a private investigator she had hired to find her birth parents. A long shot she had never expected to pay off. She hadn't looked at the phone in days. She pulled it out, her hand trembling. The screen was flashing red. "Incoming call. Urgent." Beatrice frowned. "Put that away and leave." Elena, acting on an instinct she didn't know she had, answered it. She put the phone to her ear. "Hello?" Her voice cracked. A deep British voice on the other end spoke with absolute precision. "Is this Elena Vance?" "Yes," she whispered. "Mrs. Vance, this is Archibald Sterling, Senior Counsel for the shadowy Hawthorne Trust. Do not, I repeat, do not leave your current location. Are you safe?" I don't know," Elena said, confused. "I just signed divorce papers." "Good," the voice said. "That simplifies things. Listen to me very carefully, Elena. Your DNA test results came back an hour ago. You are not a nobody. You are the sole surviving granddaughter of Elias Hawthorne." Elena gasped. Even the Thorne family knew who Elias Hawthorne was. He was an industrial tycoon, a man who owned half the shipping lines in Europe. He was a billionaire 10 times over. "He passed away this morning," the lawyer continued. "You are the sole heir to the Hawthorne empire. I am at the gates of the Thorn estate now. I'm coming in." Elena lowered the phone. She looked up at Beatrice, who was glaring at her. "Who was that?" Julian demanded, sensing the shift in the air. Elena wiped her tears. She stood up straighter. For the first time in 4 years, she didn't look down. "That," Elena said, her voice gaining strength, "was my lawyer." The air in the Thorn garden seemed to vibrate. It started as a low hum, barely audible over the confused murmuring of the guests, but within seconds it grew into a roar that shook the crystal glasses on the tables. "What is that noise?" Beatrice demanded, shielding her eyes against the sun. "Julian, did you hire a band? I told you, no live music until the speeches are done." "I didn't hire anyone," Julian said, his brow furrowing as he stood up. The answer arrived a moment later. The massive iron gates at the end of the long driveway, usually controlled by the Thorns' private security, swung open. But it wasn't the polite opening for a guest. The gates were forced wide, almost hitting the stone pillars. A convoy of vehicles swept into the estate like a storm front. Leading the pack were 2 matte black Range Rovers with tinted windows and reinforced bumpers. Flanking the rear were 2 more, but in the center, gliding over the gravel with the grace of a panther, was a vintage, 2-tone Rolls-Royce Phantom 6, the kind of car that wasn't just bought, it was inherited by royalty. "Who do they think they are?" Chloe shrieked, clutching Julian's arm. "They're driving on the grass." The convoy ignored the designated parking area. They drove straight through the manicured rose garden Beatrice had spent a fortune cultivating, crushing the prize-winning blooms under heavy rubber tires. The vehicles screeched to a halt just 10 feet from the head table, forming a semicircle of steel and intimidation. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. The doors of the SUVs flew open in unison. 8 men stepped out. They were giants, dressed not in the cheap security blazers of the Thorn estate, but in bespoke tactical suits. They wore earpieces and moved with the lethal precision of special forces. They immediately fanned out, securing the perimeter, their eyes scanning the guests as if looking for a threat. "This is private property!" Beatrice screamed, her face turning a blotchy red. "I will have you arrested! Julian, call the police!" Julian reached for his phone, but one of the guards simply held up a hand. It wasn't a threat. It was a command so absolute that Julian froze. Then the rear door of the Rolls-Royce opened. A man stepped out. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair combed back severely. He wore a 3-piece suit that cost more than the Thorn family's entire annual catering budget. He carried a silver-tipped cane, though he walked with a vigorous, purposeful stride. This was Archibald Sterling. He didn't look at Beatrice. He didn't look at Julian. He walked straight past the trembling Chloe, stepping over the grass without looking down. He walked directly to Elena, who was still clutching her cheap flip phone, tears drying on her cheeks. The guests watched in stunned disbelief as this powerful stranger stopped in front of the woman who had just been serving them ice. Archibald Sterling bowed. It was a deep, respectful bow, the kind reserved for heads of state. "Miss Vance," Archibald said, his voice rich and smooth. "My deepest apologies for the delay. The traffic on the I-95 was dreadful, and we had to scramble the helicopter to get the security team here first." I don't understand," Elena stammered, clutching the divorce papers to her chest. "You are Elena Vance, born in Chicago, 1998, adopted by the Vance family?" "Yes." Archibald nodded, signaled to one of the guards, who stepped forward with a velvet box. "Then it is my solemn duty and great honor to be the first to greet you. I am the executor of the estate of your grandfather, Elias Hawthorne." A collective gasp ripped through the crowd. "Elias Hawthorne?" Julian choked out, stepping forward. The shipping magnate? The owner of Hawthorne Global?" Archibald finally turned his icy gaze toward Julian. He looked at him as one might look at a cockroach on a dinner plate. "I am not speaking to you," Archibald said. He turned back to Eleanor. "Eleanor, your mother was Elias's estranged daughter. She ran away 30 years ago to marry a man Elias disapproved of. They died in a car accident when you were an infant, and due to a clerical error in the hospital records, Elias never knew you survived. He spent the last 20 years looking for you. He found you 3 days ago. Sadly, his heart gave out before he could hold you himself." Elena's knees buckled. Archibald caught her by the elbow, steadying her with a gentle, fatherly grip. "I have a family," she whispered. "You are the family, Elena," Archibald said softly. "You are the only blood relative left. You are the sole beneficiary of the Hawthorne Trust." Beatrice Thorne, realizing the magnitude of what was happening, pushed Chloe aside and rushed forward, her face transforming into a mask of fake concern. "Oh my goodness," Beatrice cried, clapping her hands. "Elena, did you hear that? Family! Oh, this is a miracle. I always knew you were special. I always said it, didn't I, Julian? I said she had an air of nobility about her." Archibald straightened up, towering over Beatrice. "Who is this woman?" "I am her mother-in-law," Beatrice beamed, trying to touch Eleanor's arm. "We are her family. We've taken care of her for years." Archibald looked at Eleanor. Then he looked at the table. His eyes landed on the manila envelope. "And what is this?" Archibald asked, pointing his cane at the document in Elena's hand. Elena looked down at the paper. The ink where she had signed Elena Vance was still fresh. It's a divorce settlement," Elena said quietly. The air left the room. Archibald's eyes narrowed. He reached out and gently took the papers from Eleanor. He put on a pair of gold-rimmed spectacles and read the document. A slow, shark-like smile spread across his face. "Signed," Archibald murmured. "Dated. Witnessed by..." He looked at the notary stamp on the table. "Excellent." "Wait!" Julian panicked. He lunged forward. "That hasn't been filed yet. It's not legal. We were just working through some issues." Archibald snapped the folder shut and handed it to the largest bodyguard. "Secure this in the vehicle. It is evidence." "Evidence of what?" Julian demanded. "Evidence," Archibald said, his voice booming, "that when Elena Vance inherited the Hawthorne fortune at 9 a.m. this morning, upon the death of her grandfather, she was in the process of severing ties with you. But more importantly, since you coerced her to sign this before she knew of her inheritance, and you signed it agreeing to a fixed settlement." Archibald laughed, a dry, cold sound. "Mr. Thorne, you have just signed away your claim to half of a $40 billion estate. By forcing her to sign these papers today, you saved Elena $20 billion in alimony." Julian's face went white. He looked like he was going to vomit. Beatrice grabbed the edge of the table to stop herself from fainting. $40 billion, Chloe whispered, looking at Elena with wide, terrified eyes. The shock of the number, 40 billion, hung in the humid air like a thunderhead. The guests, who had previously mocked Elena for her cheap shoes, were now looking at her as if she were a deity. $40 billion wasn't just money. It was nation-state power. It was the kind of wealth that could buy the Thorne family's entire existence 1,000 times over and still have change for coffee. Elena stood there, the realization slowly sinking in. She wasn't just free. She was powerful. "This is a mistake," Julian stammered, his voice high and desperate. He looked at Elena, his eyes pleading. "Elena, baby, listen to me. You know I love you. The papers. It was a test. Mother and I, we wanted to see if you really loved me for me, or if you were just comfortable. It was a test of loyalty. A test? Elena repeated, her voice gaining strength. She looked at the ice buckets she had hauled. She looked at the children's table where she was supposed to sit. Yes, a test, Beatrice chimed in, rallying her wits. And you passed, darling, you signed. You showed you didn't care about the money. So we can rip them up now. We can go back to being a happy family. Beatrice lunged for the bodyguard holding the folder, her manicured claws extended. The guard didn't even flinch. He simply stepped back, and another guard stepped in front of Beatrice, crossing his massive arms. Don't touch him, Archibald warned, unless you want to be charged with assaulting a federal witness. Elena, Julian pleaded, stepping around the table. He tried to take her hands, but she pulled them away as if his skin were acid. Elena, please, think about us. The memories. The honeymoon in Cabo. We were happy once. Elena looked him in the eye. We were happy when you were a nobody, Julian. When you were struggling. But the moment you got a taste of success, you turned into this. She gestured to his suit, his watch, his sneering mother. I can change, Julian cried. We can start over. With your inheritance and my business acumen, we could rule the industry. Think of the synergy. Thorne Logistics and Hawthorne Shipping. Archibald cleared his throat. It was a sound of pure derision. Ah, yes, Thorne Logistics, Archibald said, pulling a tablet from his jacket pocket. About that. He tapped the screen a few times. Mr. Thorne, is it true that 80% of your logistics supply chain relies on transatlantic freight? Yes, Julian said, confused. We are a major player. And who is your primary carrier? Archibald asked innocently. We contract through several vendors, but mostly the Euro-Atlantic line, which is a subsidiary of Hawthorne Global, Archibald finished. I checked the books on the flight over. It seems Thorne Logistics is currently 3 months behind on payments to Hawthorne Global. You owe the company $12 million. Julian gulped. It's a cash flow issue. We're resolving it. Actually, you're not, Archibald said, because as the executor of the estate, acting on behalf of the primary shareholder, Ms. Eleanor, I am hereby calling in the debt, immediately. You can't do that, Beatrice shrieked. That would bankrupt us. I can and I will, Archibald said calmly. Furthermore, I am cancelling all existing contracts between Hawthorne Global and Thorne Logistics, effective immediately. I don't believe the Hawthorne brand should be associated with failing enterprises. Julian fell to his knees. It wasn't a metaphor. He literally collapsed onto the grass, his expensive suit staining green. Elena, he begged, tears streaming down his face. Tears of financial ruin, not love. Please, you can't let him do this. You're my wife. I'm your ex-wife, Elena corrected him. You made sure of that. You handed me the pen, Julian. You told me I was a liability. She looked over at Chloe, who was slowly backing away, trying to disappear into the crowd. Chloe, Elena called out. Chloe froze. You wanted him, Elena said, her voice ringing clear across the lawn. You wanted the Thorne name. You wanted the future of the family. Well, he's all yours. You can have the debt, you can have the bankruptcy, and you can have the man who sells out the people he loves for a check. Elena turned back to Archibald. Is the car ready? It is, madam, Archibald said, gesturing to the open door of the Rolls-Royce. We have a flight waiting at the private airfield. Your grandfather's estate in Monaco requires your inspection, and the board of directors is eager to meet their new chairwoman. Wait! Beatrice screamed, running in front of the car. Elena, You ungrateful little wretch! After everything I did for you, I put a roof over your head." Elena stopped. She turned to Beatrice one last time. "You treated me like a slave in my own home, Beatrice. You made me serve your friends while you mocked me. You made me feel small so you could feel big." Elena reached into her apron pocket, the dirty, stained apron she was still wearing. She pulled it off, balling it up. "Here," she said, tossing the apron at Beatrice. It landed on the older woman's face, smearing grease on her nose. "I quit." Elena turned and stepped into the plush leather interior of the Rolls-Royce. The air conditioning was cool, smelling of expensive leather and freedom. Archibald climbed in beside her and closed the heavy door, shutting out the heat, the humidity, and the screaming Thorne family. "Go," Archibald said to the driver. The convoy began to move. As the Rolls-Royce turned around, crushing more of Beatrice's roses, Elena looked out the tinted back window. She saw Julian kneeling in the grass, his head in his hands. She saw Chloe running toward the parking lot, presumably to drive away before Julian could ask her for money. She saw Beatrice screaming at the sky, holding the dirty apron. For the first time in 4 years, Elena didn't feel the urge to cry. She reached into the center console, where a bottle of chilled vintage champagne was waiting. Archibald noticed her look. "Would you like a glass, madam?" "Yes, Archibald," Elena said, a small smile playing on her lips. "I believe I would. But no ice. I've handled enough ice for a lifetime." As the cars sped out of the gates and onto the main road, leaving the Thorne estate in the dust, Elena took her first sip of the new life. But the story wasn't over. The Thornes were down, but greed is a powerful motivator, and they weren't going to let $40 billion walk away without a fight. 3 months had passed since the incident at the Thorne estate, and the world had shifted on its axis. Elena stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her penthouse office on the 45th floor of the Hawthorne Tower in Manhattan. The city looked like a circuit board of gold and diamonds below her. She took a sip of herbal tea, her reflection in the glass showing a woman she barely recognized. Gone was the messy bun and the faded department store clothes. Elena now wore a tailored white pantsuit that screamed authority. Her hair was cut into a sharp, chic bob, and her skin glowed, not just from expensive treatments, but from the absence of stress. "Ms. Hawthorne?" Elena turned. It was her new executive assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah. "Yes, Sarah? The board meeting is in 20 minutes, but he's here again." Elena's expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. "Julian?" "Yes. And his mother. They are in the lobby. Security is holding them back, but they are causing a scene. They have a camera crew with them." Elena sighed, placing her tea on the marble coaster. Of course they do. The last 3 months had been a media circus. The Cinderella billionaire headlines were everywhere. But alongside them were the interviews given by Julian and Beatrice. They had gone on every talk show that would have them, painting themselves as the victims. They claimed Elena had defrauded them, that she had known about the inheritance and tricked Julian into a divorce to hoard the money. They spun a narrative of a scheming gold digger who abandoned her loving family the moment she got rich. It was pathetic, but it was annoying, and today it seemed they were escalating. "Archibald?" Elena asked, looking at the leather armchair in the corner where the old lawyer was reviewing contracts. Archibald looked up, his eyes twinkling with a mix of amusement and malice. "Shall we invite them up? It seems cruel to keep them waiting in the lobby with the commoners." "Let them up," Elena told Sarah, "and send them to conference room B, the one with the glass walls." 10 minutes later, Elena walked into the conference room. She didn't walk in alone. She was flanked by Archibald and 2 junior associates. Julian and Beatrice were already there, sitting on the opposite side of the long mahogany table. They looked diminished. Julian's suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Beatrice, usually perfectly coiffed, looked frazzled, her roots showing grey. Sitting next to them was a man Elena recognized from billboards on the highway. Marcus Vane, a lawyer known for chasing ambulances and loud, messy lawsuits. "Elena!" Julian exclaimed, standing up as she entered. He tried to put on a charming smile, but it faltered under her cold gaze. "You look incredible, expensive." "Sit down, Julian," Elena said, taking the seat at the head of the table. "You have 5 minutes. I have a company to run. We are here to discuss the injustice served upon my clients," Marcus Vane boomed, throwing a stack of papers onto the table. "We are filing a suit for $50 million in damages, plus 50% of the Hawthorne assets acquired during the marriage." Archibald let out a short, drow-eye laugh. "It's not funny," Beatrice snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "We are destitute. You froze our accounts. You cancelled our contracts. We are losing the house." "You are losing the house because you haven't paid the mortgage in 6 months," Elena said calmly. "And you haven't paid the mortgage because your company is bankrupt. That isn't my fault. That's bad management." "It's your fault!" Julian shouted, his veneer of charm cracking. "You vindictive witch! You bought our debt. You told the banks to call in the loans. You're doing this on purpose." "I am simply protecting my grandfather's interests," Elena said. "Thorne Logistics was a sinking ship. I just sped up the inevitable." "We want a settlement," Marcus Vane interjected. "Give us $50 million, and we drop the lawsuit regarding the validity of the divorce. We claim duress. We claim fraud. If this goes to court, the media will tear you apart. They love a story about a heartless billionaire crushing her poor, abandoned husband." Elena looked at Julian. She remembered the nights she had cried herself to sleep while he was out with Chloe. She remembered the way he had looked at her at the reunion, like she was trash. "You want $50 million?" Elena asked. "It's a fair price for your freedom," Julian said, leaning forward. "Come on, Elle. You have $40 billion. $50 million is nothing to you. Just pay us, and we disappear. I promise." Eleanor stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the skyline. The silence stretched for a long, agonizing minute. "No," she said softly. "What?" Julian blinked. Elena turned around. "No, not a penny. You forced me to sign those papers, Julian. You wanted me gone with $10,000. You set the price of my worth. You decided I was worth $10,000. So that is what you get. The check was mailed 3 months ago. Did you cash it?" "I burned it!" Beatrice screamed. "Then that's a shame," Elena said. "Because that was the only money you're ever going to see from me." "Then we'll see you in court," Marcus Vane threatened, gathering his papers, "and we will bring everything to light. The neglect, the emotional abuse you inflicted on Julian." "Bring it," Elena said, her voice dropping an octave. "But be warned, Julian. If you step into a courtroom with me, I won't just defend myself. I will countersue. I have the receipts. I have the emails between you and Chloe. I have the bank statements showing you using company funds for her apartment. I will bury you so deep under legal fees that you'll be begging to work the drive-through at a fast food joint." Julian paled. He knew she wasn't bluffing. "Get out of my building," Elena said. As security escorted them out, Julian looked back over his shoulder. For a second, he looked like the man she had fallen in love with, scared, vulnerable. "Elena," he whispered, "I miss you." "You miss the money, Julian," she said, turning her back on him. "You never knew me." The lawsuit proceeded. fueled by Marcus Vane's hunger for fame and Beatrice's delusion. They thought the threat of public scandal would make Eleanor settle. They underestimated how much Elias Hawthorne's granddaughter enjoyed a fight. The trial date was set for early December. It was dubbed the divorce of the century by the tabloids. But before the court date, there was the Hawthorne Winter Gala. It was the premier social event of the season, held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Every dignitary, celebrity, and captain of industry was there. Elena had decided to proceed with the event despite the legal drama. It was her coming-out party as the head of the family. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet, dripping with sapphires that had belonged to her grandmother. She moved through the crowd with grace, shaking hands with senators and tech moguls. "You're a natural," a voice said beside her. Eleanor turned to see Liam Blackwood. Liam was 32, the CEO of a rival shipping tech firm, and devastatingly handsome. He had been a surprising ally during her transition, offering advice on how to handle the sharks on her board. "I feel like an imposter," Elena admitted, taking a glass of sparkling water. "I feel like the waitress from the barbecue is going to pop out any second." "She won't," Liam smiled. "That woman was a survivor. This woman is a conqueror. There's a difference." Suddenly, a commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention. The security guards were struggling to hold back 3 people: Julian, Beatrice, and, shockingly, Chloe. They were dressed in formal wear, though Beatrice's dress looked dated and Julian's tuxedo was ill-fitting. "Let us in!" Beatrice was screeching. "We are family. I am the mother of the former husband. We have a right to be here." Cameras flashed. The paparazzi, who were allowed in the foyer, went wild. Elena felt her stomach drop. They were crashing her gala. "Shall I have them removed?" Liam asked, his jaw tightening. Elena watched them. They looked desperate, manic. If she threw them out, they would play the victim card again. The heartless billionaire throws her family out into the cold. "No," Elena said, a cold calm settling over her. "Let them in." She signaled to the head of security. The guards stepped back. Julian and Beatrice stumbled into the ballroom, looking triumphant. They straightened their clothes and marched toward Elena, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. "Elena!" Beatrice announced loudly, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "So kind of you to finally invite us. We were beginning to think you'd forgotten your roots." The room went silent. 500 of the most powerful people in the world were watching. "I didn't invite you, Beatrice," Elena said, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the room. "But since you're here, you might as well enjoy the hors d'oeuvres. I know things have been tight for you lately." Julian stepped forward. He had clearly been drinking. "Don't patronize us, Elena. We're here to make a deal. Stop the foreclosure. Give us back the house, and we'll leave you alone." "This isn't the place, Julian," Elena said quietly. "It's the perfect place," Julian shouted, throwing his arms wide. "Look at all these people. Do they know who you really are? Do they know you're a fraud?" He turned to the crowd. "She wasn't some hidden heiress," Julian yelled. "She was a waitress. She scrubbed my floors. She begged me for money. She's nothing," the crowd murmured, but it wasn't in agreement. It was in disgust. Julian was making a fool of himself. "And you?" Beatrice pointed a shaking finger at Eleanor. "You stole my son's future. That money should be ours. We suffered for it." "Suffered?" Elena asked, stepping closer. "You lived in a mansion while I cleaned it. You drove luxury cars while I walked to work. And when you thought I was worthless, you threw me away." She signaled to the AV booth. "Since you want to talk about the past, Julian, let's share a memory." The massive projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the Hawthorne logo, flickered. A video began to play. It was security footage from the Thorne estate. The date stamp was August 24th, the day of the reunion. The footage showed the garden. It showed the moment Beatrice slammed the divorce papers on the table. It showed Julian sneering. The audio was crisp and clear. "You are a liability. You are plain. You are uneducated." Beatrice's voice echoed through the ballroom. "Sign the papers, Elena. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Julian's voice followed. Then, the video cut to a different angle, a hidden camera in the kitchen from a week prior. It showed Julian and Chloe kissing against the counter. "When do you think she'll sign?" Chloe asked in the video. "Soon," Julian replied, laughing. "I'll humiliate her at the reunion. She's so pathetic. She'll do whatever I say just to stop the embarrassment. Then we kick her to the curb and take the bonus my mother promised." The video ended. The ballroom was dead silent. Julian stood frozen, his face the color of ash. Chloe looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. Beatrice was gasping for air, clutching her pearls. Elena stepped up to the microphone. "You claimed in your lawsuit that I defrauded you," Elena said, her voice steady. "You claimed I tricked you. But the evidence shows that you conspired to humiliate and discard me. You wanted me gone so badly that you forced a divorce before I even knew who I was. You dug your own grave, Julian. I just provided the shovel." She looked at the crowd. "I am Eleanor Hawthorne. I worked for everything I had, and I survived everything they did to me. I will not apologize for my inheritance, and I will not pay a ransom to my abusers." Thunderous applause broke out. It started with Liam, but soon the entire room was clapping, cheering for the woman who had stood tall against the bullies. Julian looked around, realizing he had lost. The court of public opinion had just delivered its verdict. "Get out," Liam said, stepping up beside Elena, "before we have you arrested for trespassing." Beatrice let out a sob and ran for the exit. Chloe followed, hiding her face with her purse. Julian stood there for one last second, looking at Eleanor. He saw the woman he had married, the woman he had betrayed, and the queen he could never reach. He turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped, a broken man. But the night wasn't over. As the applause died down, Archibald walked up to Eleanor with a grim expression. He held a phone in his hand. "Miss Hawthorne," he whispered, "we have a problem. It's about the Thorne estate. It seems Julian didn't just leave quietly. Before coming here, he did something foolish." "What?" Elena asked. "He authorized a transfer of illegal assets through Thorne Logistics in a desperate bid to make quick money. The feds just raided the warehouse, and since you are technically the owner of the debt, they are looking for you." Elena's blood ran cold, the twist she hadn't seen coming. Julian's incompetence was about to drag her into a federal investigation. The murmur in the ballroom had barely subsided when the heavy double doors swung open again. This time, it wasn't a crashing family member. It was a squad of 6 FBI agents in windbreakers, led by a stern-faced woman with a badge on her belt. The music stopped abruptly. The guests froze. "Elena Hawthorne," the lead agent called out, stepping onto the marble dance floor. Liam Blackwood stepped in front of Elena instinctively, but she placed a hand on his arm, gently moving him aside. She held her head high, the sapphires around her neck catching the light. "I am Elena Hawthorne," she said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "To what do I owe this interruption, Agent?" "Special Agent Miller," the woman said, stopping a few feet away. "We have a warrant to seize all assets related to Thorne Logistics. We have evidence of a massive shipment of illegal narcotics moving through your shipping containers in the port of Newark as we speak." The crowd gasped. A drug scandal. This could destroy everything Elena had just built. "That company is under my umbrella," Elena said calmly, "but I have not authorized any shipments since acquiring the debt." "The manifest was signed digitally yesterday," Agent Miller said, pulling out a tablet. "With an executive key. The shipment was flagged, and we've traced the authorization. We need to know who had access to the override codes." Elena looked at Archibald. The old lawyer was already opening his briefcase. He didn't look worried. He looked like a hunter who had just snapped the trap shut. "Agent Miller," Archibald said, his voice smooth as silk. "If you check the metadata on that digital signature, I believe you will find it originated from an IP address, not within Hawthorne Tower, but from a mobile device." Archibald handed the agent a thick file. "We anticipated that the former management might try something desperate," Archibald continued. "So we installed keystroke loggers on the old Thorn logistics servers. We have a complete record of the transaction. It was authorized at 4:00 p.m. yesterday." Agent Miller scanned the document. Her eyes widened. "Authorized by user ID, J. Thorn admin." "And the GPS location of the device?" Archibald prompted. "The Thorn family estate," Miller read. "Specifically the master bedroom." Elena felt a wave of relief, so strong it almost knocked her over. Julian, in his panic to pay off the debt and save his lifestyle, he had tried to use the company's infrastructure for a drug run. He had tried to frame the company, her company, to make a quick buck, or perhaps to burn it all down. "He's outside," Liam said, pointing toward the exit. "He just left." "Get him," Agent Miller commanded into her radio. "Suspect is fleeing the premises. Blue tuxedo. Apprehend immediately." The agents turned and sprinted toward the lobby. Elena, Liam, and Archibald followed, along with half the guests who couldn't resist the spectacle. They reached the grand foyer just in time to see Julian Thorn frantically trying to shove Beatrice into a taxi. "Go! Just go!" Julian was screaming, looking over his shoulder. "FBI, freeze!" Agents swarmed them. Julian tried to run, slipping on the polished floor. He was tackled instantly, his face pressed against the cold tile, handcuffs clicking shut before he could even draw a breath. "You can't do this!" Beatrice shrieked, hitting an agent with her purse. "He's a Thorn. He's a good boy." "Mom, step back or you will be arrested for obstruction," an agent barked. Julian was hauled to his feet. His lip was bleeding. He looked wild, like a trapped animal. His eyes locked onto Eleanor, who was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at him like a goddess of retribution. "Eleanor!" Julian screamed, struggling against the agents. "Help me! I did it for us! I needed the money to buy the house back! Tell them we're partners!" Elena descended the stairs slowly, stopping 3 steps from the bottom. She looked at the man who had once been her world, the man who had made her sign divorce papers at a barbecue to save a few dollars. "We aren't partners, Julian," Elena said, her voice cold and final. "And we aren't family. You are just a stranger who used to know my name." "Elena, please," he sobbed as they dragged him toward the sliding doors. "Don't let me go to prison. I can't survive in there." "You should have thought of that before you tried to smuggle drugs through my ships," she said. Beatrice threw herself at Elena's feet, grabbing the hem of her velvet gown. "Elena, mercy, please. He's my son. I'll do anything. I'll be your maid. I'll scrub your floors." Elena looked down at the woman who had tormented her for 4 years. "My floors are already clean, Beatrice," Elena said, gently pulling her dress from the woman's grip. "And unlike you, I pay my staff a living wage." Elena signaled to the doorman. "Please escort Miss Thorn off the property. She is disturbing the guests." As Julian was shoved into the back of a squad car, weeping and Beatrice was led away, wailing into the New York night, Elena felt a heavy weight lift off her chest. The chapter was closed. The ink was dry. She felt a warm hand on her back. Liam was there. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Eleanor took a deep breath. She looked at the flashing lights of the police cars fading into the distance, then back at the warm glow of the hotel where her future awaited. Yes, Elena smiled, and for the first time in her life, it was a smile of pure, unadulterated freedom. "I think I'm finally done serving others. It's time to live for myself." "Then allow me to serve you," Liam said, offering his arm. "Dinner is still waiting." Elena took his arm. Together they walked back into the light, leaving the darkness of the Thorne family behind them forever. Wow, what a satisfying ending. From being forced to sign divorce papers as a maid to watching her ex-husband get dragged away in handcuffs while she stands as a billionaire queen, Elena definitely got the last laugh. It just goes to show that you should never look down on people because you never know when the tables might turn. What do you think? Did Julian and Beatrice get what they deserved? Or was Elena too harsh? Personally, I think they got off easy. If you enjoyed this story of karma and revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. I post new dramas every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.